or the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, indirect negotiations between Israeli and Palestinian leaders are expected to begin next week as U.S. Middle East envoy George Mitchell returns to the region. The Arab League has agreed to back the U.S. proposal for 4 months of indirect talks. While many observers are skeptical of these so-called proximity talks succeeding when years of direct negotiations have failed to produce an equitable and lasting peace. Meanwhile, Palestinian civil society and international solidarity activists are using very different tactics to push for a just resolution of the conflict. In 2005, a coalition of Palestinian civil society groups called for people all over the world to engage in a nonviolent campaign to boycott, divest from, and sanction Israel until it complies with international law. Inspired by the international boycott and divestment initiatives applied to South Africa in the struggle to abolish apartheid, the new movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, or BDS for short, was born.
This week marks what many BDS campaigners call Israeli Apartheid Week. First launched at the University of Toronto in 2005, it now includes events at university campuses in more than 40 cities around the world. Several Israeli officials and diasporic Jewish organizations have criticized the events, and a recent report by an Israeli think tank highlights the BDS movement as part of a delegitimization network that Israel should treat as a potentially existential threat. Well, today we're going to host a debate on the BDS movement, the call to boycott, divest from, and sanction Israel. Omar Barghouti is a founding member of the BDS campaign. He's a Palestinian human rights activist and commentator. He's joining us from Berkeley, California. And for an anti-BDS position, we're joined from Philadelphia by Rabbi Arthur Waskow, longtime anti-war and civil rights activist, founder and director of the Shalom Center, the shalomcenter.org. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Omar Barghouti, why don't you lay out why you established the BDS campaign, why you want people to boycott, divest from, and sanction Israel?
The Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, or BDS campaign, is a call by Palestinian civil society. It's supported by almost the entire Palestinian civil society, political forces, NGOs, women's organizations, unions, and so on. It's calling upon people of conscience around the world to boycott Israel and institutions that are complicit with Israel, including companies and so on, because of its three-tiered system of oppression against the Palestinian people. Its occupation, 1967 occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and that includes East Jerusalem, as well as its system of racial discrimination against its non-Jewish citizens, the Palestinians, citizens of Israel. And the third and foremost is its denial of the right of return for the refugees, Palestinian refugees, in accordance with UN Resolution 194. So these three forms of injustices are exactly what we're targeting. We're targeting Israel because we want to end its impunity, and we want to end complicity of the world in this system of injustice.
And Rabbi Arthur Waskow, could you explain to us why you think this is a wrong approach to the problem?
So first let me say shalom and salam and peace to you, Amy, and Juan, and to Mr. Barghouti. And to say, to begin with, that in a sense I think the question, yes or no, on BDS is the wrong question. The right question is, how do we bring about an end to the Israeli occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, and the blockade of Gaza, and of East Jerusalem? And it seems to me that when you put the question that way, BDS really becomes an ineffective and, in some ways, unethical way of going about it. That the major change that needs to happen is a profound change in the actions of the United States government, and that there were hints of that, more than hints in the rhetoric of President Obama, but a total failure to carry through in policy on the rhetoric of the Cairo speech and some work since then. The real question is, can the United States, will the United States, it can for sure, will the United States use its enormous influence and power to end the occupation, to end the state of war between Israel and the entire Arab world, except for Egypt and Jordan? can the United States bring about a full-fledged peace treaty between a new state of Palestine, the state of Israel, and the Arab states? The Arab states have, in fact, proposed this. The Israeli government and the last U.S. government, the Bush administration, totally ignored the proposal. There are hints that that's what the Obama administration wants to bring about. But it won't happen unless there is a public movement in American society to demand that. It won't happen otherwise. And when I ask the question, so what's the most effective way of bringing that about, it seems to me an alliance of the three groups of people in America who care passionately about the peoples of the Middle East: Muslims, serious Christians, and serious Jews. An alliance of those in those three camps who are committed to peace is now possible. In the Jewish community, there are now organizations and commitments and human beings ready to act on this, even though the classic formal institutional structure of the established Jewish institutional system doesn't, but the Jews do. And among Muslims and among most Protestant and Catholic Christians, not some of the right-wing fundamentalist Christians, but the rest of the Christian community. But they have not come together in any way to make this happen, and that's what needs to happen. There are reasons that I think BDS is a mistaken approach, and I'll explore those, but I wanted to make clear that I think there is another way to go at this.
Before Omar Barghouti responds, I wanted to stay with you, Rabbi Waskow. You supported the anti-apartheid movement. You supported the divestment movement and the sanctions movement against South Africa. But you call the BDS movement against Israel, as you were just saying, perhaps unethical. What do you see as the difference?
Well, one major difference is a strategic difference. The enormous support for the South African apartheid regime did not come from governmental sources. It came from private banks. I did a sit-in at the Chase Manhattan Bank in 1965 to demand an end to its loans to the apartheid government. In this situation, the enormous economic support is not coming from private banks and industry. There's some, but that's not the big support. The big support is from the United States government. That's totally different from the South African situation. If you apply the kind of basic issue in South Africa, how do you change the economic relations with the unjust behavior of the Israeli government now and the unjust and violent and occasionally vile behavior of some Palestinian leaders? How do you change that? It's the United States government you got to look to, not private industry or private commerce. So that's one really big difference simply at strategic and tactical levels. Ethically, the problem is that there is a real Israeli society with a decent substructure, culture, economics, life process, the revival of Hebrew, the creation of novels, et cetera, et cetera. The trouble with the BDS across the board, sanctions and boycotts and so on vis-a-vis Israel, is that it demonizes Israeli society. It does not say there is an Israeli government which is behaving badly, and therefore we need to bring pressure to bear on the Israeli government. As, by the way, and not so by the way, the folks who actually did the Gaza freedom voyage found that when they got into Gaza, Hamas acted unjustly and repressively toward them. It didn't want them to make contact with the Palestinians of Gaza, the real folks.